Hey, what's up? It's me, Chad, from the Gatos and Chad Show, and I'm here. It is Skin Cancer Awareness Month, and I'm going to get checked here in a second. And Doc, tell everybody who you are and what we're going to be doing to me today.
Thanks for having me. I'm Dr. Mullins. I'm with Arizona Skin Cancer Foundation. On behalf of them, we're giving you a free skin cancer screening to help educate you and the population here in Arizona that receives a ton of sun how to go about taking care of their skin and making sure nothing's dangerous that they could be addressing.
And because I golf a lot, we're going to do this. So let's get started here and see if I'm doing okay.
All right. So typically when we do our skin checks in the office, they'll be under a well-lit table. And we have magnification, things that we can use to our tools to allow us to evaluate spots that might be a little bit more concerning. We can look at it further. We don't have that today, so we'll just be using the naked eye, and we'll just kind of run through this. So first things I do is I look at areas that are sun exposed. Those are going to be the most high-risk locations. So arms, face, hands, feet, legs, those are all areas that we typically get a lot of that sunlight. So I'll be looking for anything that's pink, rough, and scaly. That's commonly known as actinic keratosis. That happens quite a bit out here in Arizona. For fair-skinned individuals that burn and don't tan, it's even more common.
Farmer tan.
Farmer tan. So these are things that we need to be looking for. So a lot of these are some scratches, probably from hitting those balls in the rough.
No, I have ginormous lizards, and
oh wow,
yeah, they're about 7 feet long. So moving them the last couple days has been quite amazing.
Maybe some long sleeves next time.
Yeah.
So then we move on to like the neck here. And obviously the neck gets a lot of sunlight, and you notice that probably sometimes your neck feels a little bit tight and sore after you get a little bit of that sunlight. So we have some sun damage here. If you've noticed some of the rough scaly on the back, that stuff we would need to freeze. We'd want you to come to the office. We'd use liquid nitrogen. That's negative 196 degrees. We freeze that area. It freezes the water in those skin cells, and then once it thaws, it kind of exfoliates that off. It's rapid exfoliation. It's tremendously effective though. Cold, it's so cold it burns, but it works.
Well, so what about like sunblock? That's always the thing. Like how much sunblock is too much? Is not enough? Is
good question. So it all depends on the activities that you're doing. The minimum SPF that we're looking for is 30, and we want it to be broad spectrum, so blocking UVA and UVB sunlight.
Okay.
Typically, I recommend mineral-based sunscreens, and there's two minerals. One's zinc oxide, the other one's titanium dioxide. Those two are going to be broad spectrum. They're going to typically or traditionally be the one that you would associate with that lifeguard with the zinc on his nose. In the past, it used to be a formulation that was white sheen. Now they have it in nanoparticles, so it goes elegant on the skin, so you're not seeing that white sheen, especially if you're somebody that's a little bit more dark complected. That was usually one of the reasons why people didn't like using it. But that's fantastic and it's safe. Less irritating if you get sweat and it goes in the eye. Tends to be a little bit less irritating versus the chemical-based sunscreens as well. So that's what I would recommend. If you're doing things that you're being exposed to water, sweat, different things that you'd be doing that would make that sunscreen come off sooner, you'd need to reapply. Every time you get out of the pool, you dry off, reapply. Otherwise, if you're just golfing on the course, every 2 to 3 hours.
okay.
I generally reapply it after the 9th hole. So
Yeah, that's kind of what I do. I get it right around the turn.
Especially,
especially
if you're noticing that you're rubbing some areas and drying your hands, doing certain things when you're playing, you tend to see some areas they end up rubbing off a little bit quicker. But as a golfer, we get a lot of sun out there, so it's important that you try to err on the side of being a little bit too early on the application versus late.
What's the places that people don't even think to look? I've heard stories about like in between the toes. It's like people notice stuff, or
and that's a good
here,
point. Yeah.
like people never even look at to spray here. They're all over, but right here it's.
And that's probably perhaps one of the more valuable things of what we end up being able to provide and catch when somebody comes in for a skin exam or a concern relating to their skin. We end up addressing that concern, but when we look over their body, we might end up identifying a spot they were totally unaware of. That's not uncommon. It might be a skin cancer, it might be something that's not cancerous, but it's something that needs to be possibly addressed. Bob Marley, he classically died from melanoma on the toe.
Yeah.
He had a black toenail, thought it was an old soccer injury because he played soccer with no shoe on.
Yeah.
So that's a sports analogy for you. So he had that, and there's sometimes things that we think is seemingly benign. Just a stubbed toe, it was a bruise, black and blue. That was actually melanoma. So subungual melanoma, rare, less than 5% of the melanomas, but it is something that can occur. We also try to make sure that we're also looking for those things that are even more likely to be happening. Things that just might be present on the neck, in the area that we don't typically see in a visual field in the mirror every morning. Sometimes those are easily missed, but they're easily treated if we catch them.
What about like we were talking about sunburns, and then you get tan. Like my freckles come together every once in a while, but it's not it's not like it's damaging.
So when you see freckles on somebody's skin under a microscope, if we were to take a piece of that tissue and look at it, it would be no different than somebody with a tan. But instead of having a nice even layer of pigment in your skin cells, you'd see little clumps and spaces in between the clumps, and that's what appears as freckles when we look at your skin visually. So it is a sign of sun damage. It's a sign of getting excess UV light. So we want to make sure that we're trying to just protect and guard from those harmful UV rays when we're out there. A lot of times it happens when we're not really knowing that we're being exposed to that ultraviolet light, to and from the car, going to work, coming in from work, going to the grocery store. Those little short bursts of exposure, they add up.
Yeah.
So those are all times that you want to be trying to protect yourself from. Otherwise, peak hours of the day, we always say, between 10 and 2. If you can't see your shadow, the old saying is run. That means it's at high noon, it's going to be the most intense.
Growing up in Southern California, I lived near the beach, and it was always like one of those things where it's going to kind of be a cloudy day, and people don't realize
you're a beach guy.
Yeah.
Okay. So you get 80% of the UV reflected off of a water surface. So you're getting 1.8x on the ultraviolet light each day you're out there. So you're not only going to see sun damage from being out there in that sunny weather that you're in Southern California with, but you're getting 1.8x.
Yeah.
Water and sand, they can both reflect. So
same thing goes for pools.
Pools. And what we end up seeing in individuals. So if I have a surfer, somebody that was a long time Southern Cal person, they spent a lot of time on the water, boat, fishing, things like that. We end up seeing sometimes some areas where we get reflection off the water. It might be in this corner right here by the eye where it meets the nose. Sometimes these areas where you see have sunlight hitting it from in the sky, also coming up from the water. So you might see some less common locations that might be getting that double time of the UV light shows that damage. So interesting.
For the average person, they probably don't even go in it. Their normal doctor sees something and then they refer it. How much should you actually go in and get it checked? How many times?
If somebody has their primary care doctor doing a skin check on them, awesome. They got a good primary care doctor. And if they have somebody that sees something that they're concerned about and they make the effort to send them over to see a dermatologist, even better primary care doctor. So hold on to whoever you have if they're doing a skin check and having you get it looked at further if they're concerned. I love that behavior, and we need a lot of that. That's going to lead to better outcomes for everybody. Typically, we base the frequency or how often somebody should get their skin checked based off of a multitude of factors. Family history, personal history. Were you from Southern Cal? Were you at a higher elevation? Did you grow up in Colorado, Prescott, somewhere 5,000 feet elevation or higher? That's a risk. Do you have blue eyes? Do you got red hair, freckles, blonde hair? Do you burn and not tan? Do you have a history of sun tanning bed use? All of these things will play into it. Then history of skin cancer. Do you have a history of skin cancer? What type? If it's non-melanoma skin cancer, by far and away the most common, right? 4 million people will be diagnosed with that this year. That's something we would typically say if you've been diagnosed with that in the next 5 years, you got a 30 to 50% chance of having another one somewhere. And 70 to 80% of all those happen in the next 2 years. So there's a lot of value seeing you a little bit more frequent, especially early on. Melanoma, typically we'll see every 3 to 4 months. It's really important that we're monitoring that site where we treated and had that removed, and we're always watching for any return, any residual, or any new spots. That's really important because, as we know, that's deadly.
I've got tattoos, and it was interesting. We were talking earlier because a bunch of people behind the scenes, you can't even see them. They talking about if your tattoo guy or gal sees it, maybe the person that's doing your hair, your makeup person sees something.
Yeah.
Maybe not tattoo over some of that stuff just to get looked at.
That's happened. I've had some hairstylists there, doing hair on a patient that I had that was sent in from that hairstylist because they saw a new spot. That's awesome. I love when somebody sends somebody in from getting their hair cut and they notice a lesion that they thought looked different because they see scalps every day. They're cutting hair, probably 30, 40 people at least a day. If they see something that looks funky to them, most likely it's something that's atypical or uncommon, and that usually should be looked at. Now, in terms of tattoos, there's pros and cons to it. I've had patients that have had tattoos, and then because of the color of the tattoo they've had, they were told that their color of their tattoo would change with a tanning bed from the UV light. And because of that, they stopped tanning bed use. And because of that, they're going to have less risk of a skin cancer. So some things do modify our behavior. Tattoos aren't bad. I don't think they're a bad thing at all, but they do make it a little bit more difficult for us to evaluate whatever area that it's covering. And we always want to make sure that we're trying to look at that and look through that the best we can to observe and evaluate any moles. Sometimes seeing a new mole within that pigment, especially if it's darker pigment, can be difficult. Yeah, I've had some individuals, they'll get a beautiful tattoo over a larger birthmark. And sometimes there are these congenital nevi, and occasionally they can have change within them, depending on the size, the duration, certain factors. So yeah, that makes it a little bit more complex, but nothing's straightforward and nothing simple with anybody's skin. That's just one that it seems a little bit more obvious. It would make it a little bit tricky, but you can get tricked on just the basic stuff.
Why do people get scared to go in and get looked at?
Just like anything, fear is one of the biggest things that will deter us from going in, and it will delay it, and then eventually when it becomes such a problem that you can't ignore it anymore, you go and get it looked at, and then it becomes more of a bear to deal with. It's always easier to address something sooner rather than later. It's always easier to treat it if we caught it sooner rather than later. There's also a cost to it as well, right? Financially, when you're young, sometimes it's not as easy to cover some of those bills, medically speaking. So you need to go somewhere that's going to treat you ethically. It's going to be conservative, but also aggressively conservative, meaning they're going to protect your health, make sure that there's nothing that's dangerous that could cause you harm, but not doing anything further. And that's a really important balance that we have for our patients.
Tell everybody, go get checked.
Yeah, you go get your skin checked and get a baseline, and from there you'll learn.
Go get checked.
Learn a little bit.
If I can do it, you can do it.
Get your skin checked at least once this year, and from there you should be trying to make sure that you're learning the things to look for after you've had that evaluation and know what to come in and be seen when you do see that.
Do we adjust for age?
Well, with age comes more sunlight, so cumulative sun exposure is going to be a risk factor, right? So if a 10-year-old's in Southern Cal and a 60-year-old's in Southern Cal, and they've both been there since they were born, that 60-year-old's going to have a lot more sun damage. So they're going to be somebody that's probably more likely to be getting seen more frequent. So again, it's all just tailored based off of risk.
All right, go get checked, everybody. It's simple, it's easy, and this doctor knows what he's talking about. He's the man. Plus, he golfs too, so he checks himself to make sure he's got nothing.